What would you do if, late one quiet night in your own home, you suddenly saw someone walking toward you even though you knew for a fact that everyone in the house was already asleep? Not a shadow, not something you caught from the corner of your eye, not a quick blur that vanished before you could focus on it. I mean someone standing there clearly, close enough to see their face, close enough to notice their clothes, close enough to realize that something about them wasn't normal. Now imagine watching that figure for several seconds only to realize that their entire body is glowing with a faint blue light and you can actually see through them. And then imagine telling your family about it the next day only for them to laugh and say you imagined the whole thing. That's exactly what happened to me. Even though this experience happened years ago, I still remember every single detail like it happened yesterday. Some memories fade over time. Faces become blurry, moments lose their clarity, and eventually you start to question whether you even remember things correctly. But this memory has never faded. It is sharp, clear, and burned into my mind forever because one night, in the quiet of my own living room, I'm certain that I saw a ghost. This happened quite a few years ago, but the memory has stayed with me ever since. There are certain moments in life that your brain just refuses to forget. Moments that become permanently etched into your mind. This was one of those moments. I can remember the exact layout of the room that night. I remember where the couch was, where the lamp stood, and the direction the hallway stretched toward the bedrooms. I even remember the feeling of the room itself, the quietness, the stillness, and the calm atmosphere that filled the house. It was late in the evening. Most of the lights in the house were already turned off, and everyone in my family had gone to bed. The house had that familiar nighttime silence that only happens when everyone else is asleep. The television was off. No music was playing. The only sound in the entire house was the faint hum of appliances somewhere in the background. I was lying on the couch in the living room, just relaxing. I wasn't doing anything in particular, just resting and letting my thoughts drift the way they often do late at night. Everything felt normal, completely ordinary. There was absolutely nothing strange or unusual about the situation. Until suddenly, something changed. At first it was just a small movement that caught my attention. You know how your eyes naturally react when something moves nearby even if you're not focusing on that area? That's exactly what happened. From the corner of my eye I noticed movement coming from the hallway. The hallway connects the living room to the bedrooms, so it's a place where family members often pass through. My first thought was that someone had gotten up during the night, maybe to grab a glass of water or go to the bathroom. Without thinking much about it I turned my head to look. That's when I saw him. At first my brain didn't quite understand what it was seeing. The figure looked human but something about it was different. Very different. Standing near the corner of the hallway was a person-shaped figure made of a soft blue light. The glow wasn't harsh or bright like a flashlight. Instead it was gentle, almost like the faint glow of moonlight. But the strangest part was that the figure was transparent. I could actually see through him. Even though his body looked like it was made entirely of light I could still see details behind him through the glowing form. He slowly stepped out from around the hallway corner and began walking toward the living room. Toward me. I was completely stunned. My brain froze for a moment trying to process what I was seeing. The figure wasn't far away either. He couldn't have been more than 10 or 15 feet away from where I was lying on the couch. That distance is close enough to clearly see someone's face and I could see his face. The figure looked like a young man probably somewhere in his early 20s. His features were clearly visible despite the blue glow that surrounded him. He appeared to be Asian. His hair was short and his facial features were calm and serious. What stood out the most to me was the expression on his face. It wasn't angry or threatening. It wasn't the kind of expression you would expect from something terrifying. Instead he looked stoic, quiet, almost sad. There was a heaviness in his expression that made him seem strangely human. As he walked forward I noticed something else that shocked me even more. The clothes he was wearing didn't look modern. They looked like some kind of military garment. I'm not an expert on military uniforms but the clothing had that structured appearance that you usually see in formal military attire. The design looked older, almost historical. Even though the figure was glowing and transparent the clothing details were incredibly clear. The folds of the fabric, the shape of the collar, the outline of the sleeves, everything was visible. And as he walked something even stranger happened. Behind him, trailing gently through the air, was a stream of blue light. It flowed from his body like a soft ribbon of glowing mist slowly waving up and down as he moved forward. The movement of the light looked almost like smoke drifting in slow motion. It was strangely beautiful. At that moment my emotions were impossible to describe. I felt shocked, confused, amazed, completely bewildered. All of these feelings were happening at the same time. My eyes were wide open, completely locked onto the figure. I remember being extremely aware of my heartbeat as it started to speed up. But the strange thing is that I wasn't terrified. Most people imagine that seeing a ghost would instantly cause panic. In movies, people scream, run away, or hide. But that wasn't my reaction at all. Instead, I just stared. I watched every movement carefully, trying to understand what was happening. The figure continued walking slowly in my direction. Step by step, he moved across the room. Even though the entire experience lasted only about 5 or 6 seconds, it felt much longer in the moment. Time seemed to stretch and each second felt unusually long. Part of my brain kept telling me that what I was seeing couldn't possibly be real, but another part of my mind kept insisting that my eyes were not lying to me. Everything looked too detailed to be an illusion, too clear to be imagination. Then something started to change. As the figure moved closer to me, the glow around him began to fade slightly. The edges of his body became softer and less defined. It looked as if his entire form was slowly dissolving into the air. The trail of blue light behind him began to disappear as well. Within a few seconds, the glowing outline of his body started to break apart, almost like mist being carried away by an invisible breeze. And then, just like that, he vanished completely. The space where he had been standing was now empty. The living room looked exactly the same as it had before, and the hallway was quiet again. The entire encounter had lasted only 5 or 6 seconds, but those few seconds left a permanent mark on my memory. For a while I stayed on the couch trying to process what had just happened. My heart was still beating faster than usual, but the emotion I felt wasn't fear. It was amazement. Pure amazement. I kept replaying the moment over and over in my mind, examining every detail I could remember. Eventually I got up and looked around the house. Part of me expected to find some kind of explanation. Maybe someone had been walking through the house and the lighting had created a strange illusion. But everything was quiet and everyone was asleep. Nothing seemed out of place and the house looked completely normal. The next day I decided to tell my family about what had happened. I described everything exactly the way I remembered it. The glowing blue figure, the young man's face, the military-style clothing, and the strange trail of light that followed him as he walked. But their reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of being surprised or curious, they mostly just laughed. One of them said I've always had a vivid imagination. Another suggested that I was probably half asleep and dreaming. Someone else said it was probably just a trick of the light. But I knew that wasn't the case. I was completely awake and my eyes were wide open the entire time. I watched that figure clearly for several seconds. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a reflection. And it definitely wasn't a dream. I know what I saw. The strange thing is that before that night I didn't believe in ghosts at all. Whenever people talked about paranormal experiences, I usually assumed there was a logical explanation. Maybe their mind filled in details that weren't really there, or maybe their eyes misinterpreted something in the darkness. I always believed that ghost sightings were probably misunderstandings. But after that night my perspective changed, because when something like that happens to you personally, when you see it with your own eyes, it becomes much harder to dismiss. It makes you question things you never questioned before. Is there something beyond what we normally see? Is it possible that some part of people continues to exist after death? I don't claim to know the answers to those questions. All I know is that on that quiet night in my living room I saw something that I still cannot explain. And the strangest part of the experience wasn't fear. It was the calmness I felt during the encounter. The figure didn't seem threatening. He didn't rush toward me or behave aggressively. He simply walked forward with that quiet, somber expression on his face. Sometimes I still think about him. Who was he? Why did he appear in my house? Was he aware that I could see him, or was it just some strange coincidence that our paths crossed for a few brief seconds? I may never know the answers, but one thing is certain. That moment changed the way I see the world forever, because once you experience something like that firsthand, it becomes impossible to completely deny that there may be more to reality than we understand. Even if nobody else believes you, even if everyone insists it was just your imagination, deep down you still know the truth. And the truth is that one quiet night, for about 5 or 6 unforgettable seconds, I watched a glowing blue figure walk out of my hallway toward my couch and then disappear into thin air.